senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il piano Easy Smart a canone zero, anziché a 3,90 € al mese. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca. Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Nasce Easy Bank, la nuova banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.
Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il piano Easy Smart a canone zero, anziché a 3,90 € al mese. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca. serve quando ti serve. Nasce Easy Bank, la nuova banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo. Benvenuti.
Welcome to this meeting on our daily responsibility. I would like to greet Agnese Pini, the director of QN, of the QN newspaper. Ivano Fontana, the director of the paper Corriere della Sera. Maurizio Molinari, director of the paper Repubblica, and Roberto Somella, the director of MF Milano Finanza. Thank you very much for being with us. Any one of us is responsible to get informed on the most topical issues, on the most important issues concerning our country, politics, the public debate, and what goes on in the public sphere. And to do that, we are used at reading daily papers, daily newspapers, so that we can are responsible and therefore responsibly take part in the life of our country. And this, of course, calls upon newspapers to be, in turn, responsible. They have to make sure that the information they provide is understandable, comprehensive. They have to make sure that they prioritize issues concerning a number of significant topics. Let us think, for example, about health. That is apparently issue, but it is indeed no. And this is basically what we wanted to talk about today. Before we start, I'd like to kindly ask our guests to share your views on the contribution by President Sergio Mattarella this morning, who was significantly a very high-level speech, both culturally and politically. And we, as the Rimini meeting, will certainly make reference to that speech. Agnese Pini. First of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation and good afternoon. As you rightly pointed out, President Mattarella's speech this morning helped us in a way touch upon the most important political issues. Inevitably, he talked about migration. That's one issue which is very much debated by all political parties, both in government and the opposition, and that's a hot issue also for our local administrators. They are currently finding it really hard to face this emergency. President Mattarella, and this is something that really struck me, President Mattarella managed to address ideological and cultural issues, the issues that have concerned us all over the last few days. President Mattarella used the term anachronistic when, for example, he made reference to the fact that there might be an Italian ethnic group. This is something that is not supported by any scientific study, historical study, or anthropological study. And President Mattarella did even something more. He, in a way, tried to comment what happened over the last few days, and he also tried to address the case of General Vannacci, but never mentioned him. And he gave us hints that, in a way, hinted to all the things that were published in the papers and appeared on TV. So hatred as an issue. The question that we asked ourselves is namely the following: is there a right to hatred? President Mattarella used a sentence which we should all remember. He made reference to our Constitution and to the very fabric that supports our democracy and civilization. And he said that our Constitution basically is there to help us expel the right to hatred. In no norms there is the possibility to write. There is no possibility that refers to the right to hate someone. So any civilization and democracy should have as an objective to kind of marginalize feelings of hatred, especially if these feelings are expressed by people in power or who cover important institutional offices. And that is why I believe that President Mattarella should be remembered. He started from the assumption that hatred is not a right, but rather a feeling. So if you start from this assumption, anything else loses its depth and consistency. Thank you. Roberto Somella. First of all, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. As usual, I was very much struck by the fact that the President of our Republic perfectly embodies the unity of our nation and the complexity of our country by using memory, culture, writing, reading. And this leads me to the many excerpts that he also said and wrote to refer to journalists. The sentence that struck me the most refers to the need to be integrated, to show solidarity, to remember what is written in our Constitution, starting from the very first articles. And in this respect, he said that friendship is an investment. And I'm saying this not because I had a financial paper, and not because Sergio Mattarella said that because he had something economic or financial in mind. Basically, he said that friendship has the same weight as love, and very often, all too often, we kind of set it aside. Friendship is precisely what makes us feel good in happy moments and supports us in difficult moments. And friendship is a glue, and our society, unfortunately, is losing this glue. Probably this has happened due to the pandemic. We have gone through 3 years in which really unthinkable things have happened. We learned to think the unthinkable because sometimes it happens that you are hit by a pandemic coming from an unknown virus that kills people. It might happen that lockdown periods are imposed, that people have to stay home and not go to work or university. Much has been said, for example, by our students and pupils who didn't have to go to school and could not have adequate access to education due to connection issues. And after that, we had to witness a war at the borders of the European Union. And I'm stating this as a pro-European. So we've gone through these 3 years. It seems that these 3 years are much longer. And the very fact that the focus is on the fact that the individual should always correspond to a person is something that is philosophical and that tells us a lot about the value and the profile of Sergio Mattarella. This is something that we see every day. He manages to keep everything united, everything together, also commenting on trivial things. So I would like to claim that it is always very, very important to have Sergio Mattarella as president of our republic. This is some kind of a gift that we've received, and we should actually cherish this gift. Also, on my part, good afternoon, and the Rimini meeting has become also for me an important moment in which I can exchange views with other colleagues, and I'm very happy to be here. Many things have already been said by Agnese and Roberto. I would like to mention two additional aspects. The first element has to deal with the slogan of this meeting, human existence, which is based on an inextinguishable friendship. And in this respect, Sergio Mattarella said something that appears to be outdated. He talked about our societies, our identities, our political communities, which are not based on confrontation, on hatred or opposition. They might be based on differences in terms of views or opinions. They might be founded on an exchange of views, but they are never founded on elements that are destructive of our political, economic, or social relations. It might be trivial to remind people of this, but as a matter of fact, this is not the case if we were to judge from the way in which our public life is being developed. So the very fact that Sergio Mattarella brought this topic again to the core of the political discussion is something that can be the basis for the debate of the future months, in which we're called upon to discuss really significant, important topics. As Somella reminded us all, we were sort of eluded by the fact that we could be better. We could have become better after the pandemic, that we could have become a society based on cohesion, a society based on compromise. But actually, politics and human actions are, in a way, based on noble compromises. In fact, this is not the case. We have not become better after the pandemic. And this is something that we can daily experience if we talk about migration. I am really sometimes irritated by extreme positions on the one and on the other side. There are people who say that we have to face an emergency. People constantly claim this, and Mattarella rightly reminded us of the fact that emergency flows are not an emergency. Migrations are something that will accompany us for the next years and decades for a number of reasons. They will be there to stay due to demographic reasons, and due also to the need that every human being has to improve their own lives. And then also because of the fact that there is a declining birth rate in the Western world. If you look at this aspect from this perspective, well then, it is not with slogans or words that you can, in a way, address the issue. You can start, in a way, reasonably think how it is possible to regulate migration flows. As Mattarella said, it is important to kind of focus on a much broader legal kind of migration. And we also have to think about how the Italian and European community reacts to the phenomenon of migration. These are important, significant issues which are structural. And these issues should be deprived of, in a way, extreme views and the attitude of those who always have to, in a way, speak the last word. I hope that the lesson taught to us by the President of the Italian Republic can accompany us for long.
Grazie di questo.
Thank you very much. The work of a journalist consists in sharing our experiences with the public, with the audience. And actually, the Rimini meeting is a very good venue to do this. I think that there are three aspects that clearly emerge from the speech by Mattarella. The first is the definition of the Italian identity, which is the result of a number of multiple identities and languages. So he used just 10 words to kind of dismantle the theory of a general who, in a way, used inappropriate words, and of all those who, in a way, think in linear terms when talking about a Mediterranean identity, which is the result of multiple cultures. And this is the first aspect. Second aspect, he recalled the importance of protecting the climate and the environment, especially in Italy, where our territory has been hit by climate change. And I think that here, too, he made reference to topical topics, but also to the fact that the political community, and sometimes also in the current right-wing government, because many of its members, including the Prime Minister, still do not use the term climate change. So our Prime Minister does not use the term climate change. So Mattarella has kind of hinted to the present times, which is a dramatic one, especially with reference to young generation. And then there's a third aspect, which in my view is the most revolutionary, the most innovative. He made reference to the American Revolution and to the right to pursue happiness. And in this respect, President Mattarella, in my view, has shown us a recipe to combat inequalities. Inequalities are the deepest, the most profound wound of Italy and of any advanced society. Inequalities express malaise, and from malaise you can then have protest. So you have to kind of eliminate what generates totalitarianism and loneliness. So Mattarella's answer is in line with the Constitution and focuses on a Euro-Atlantic identity that binds the American Constitution to our Constitution. And he said that happiness can be the antidote to malaise and protest. And using his words, he said that happiness is expressed through inclusion, friendship, and the ties between human beings. I think that this is a very far-sighted way of thinking. It is very topical. It applies to both our country, but also to any democracy which suffers from inequalities and populism. Because of these three reasons, what Mattarella said has confirmed that Mattarella is an indispensable president for all of us. Thank you.
Le modalità delle vostre risposte.
Your answers already say a lot on what journalism should do. And I'm now reading out a passage on the encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti, and I'm going to read this passage now.
Endo meno il silenzio e l'ascolto.
Without silence and without listening, with the very speedy messages, we put at stake the structure of a wise communication among human beings, creating a lifestyle where we create what we want to create, excluding everything that we cannot control in a very quick way. These dynamics make it impossible to reflect and think, which would in turn lead us to a common wisdom. The papers, the dailies you represent, have the possibility to help, at least to contribute to this wise reflection, this deep reflection. So in this very complex situation, how can you play a role? Luciano Fontana. Well, it is easy to say we do or we play our role. The problems we are talking about concerning superficiality, lack of an effective communication have nothing to do with us. But actually, the world of information is undergoing one of the biggest transformations in history. We are in the middle of a real revolution in terms of how people gather news. So it is extremely difficult to find the role you need to play and your identity in order to have a positive role in the world of information and, above all, for our society, because obviously providing information, receiving information is at the very basis of the growth of a country. Information comes from thousands of different sources. Sometimes these news are correct, sometimes they are completely fake, and sometimes they are deliberately fake because there are some political or economic interests behind. So we need to acknowledge this. We need to be able to address this situation, and this is one of our most important duties. It has to do with our role, but it has to do with the society as a whole. How do you actually fight against fake news? This is a question that is often asked. Well, I think the only way to do it is through a culture with a critical spirit, with training. There will never be a law that protects us. There will just be a strong education of those who provide news and information, as well as of the people that receive them. So how can we contribute to this wise communication, as the Pope called it? Well, I believe that we have a few important things to do. The first is to be extremely responsible and serious. Maybe these words might sound outdated, but being responsible means evaluating news, verifying their accuracy, and respect on the news we have. We don't need to put in play our interests, our ideologies, our prejudice. So seriousness and respect for information and for the news we provide our citizens with. So we need to do this in order to contribute to the civil and social growth of a country. So it is something, as I said, a little bit outdated, maybe out of context in a world where everything happens quickly and everything is here and now. But I think that what we have to do is to verify better and maybe give up this speed. Because, for instance, social networks are something that go beyond our horizon. They are, in a way, a source of information, but they are mainly a place of conversation and communication. And it is necessary that young people understand the role of social networks, because they are the main users of social networks. The second issue is the respect of opinions, of the ideas of others. No one should just read the newspaper that has the same ideas his same ideas or his the same way of thinking, because the opinion we have needs to be challenged. It has to open up new horizons. We cannot close ourselves within a bubble. When you read the papers in the morning, you have to feel that your head opens up, and has to give you new ideas and new points of view, so that people can actually grow. So if we do this, if they contribute to the growth of the country, if we do not use opinions as stones we throw at those who think differently from us, then maybe we can be able to contribute, to give our contribution. This is what the Pope wanted to say. Thank you. Luciano.
Maurizio Molinari.
Maurizio Molinari. We live in a time of a digital revolution. The last transformation was of the same size was that of the Industrial Revolution. That means that our way of living, what we do, changes deeply. What can we do to face it? Well, first of all, we have to know that data and news are very often traded goods in a way in a digital world. So we, the newspapers, are on the front line in this revolution, this transformation phase. Secondly, we need to make a distinction between two different times. We need to understand innovation. In the past, when people tried to block the development of industries, this turned out to be very detrimental. So this is the same today for newspapers and news. Today, the digital world is connected to the web, and in the future also IA. So this is the challenge of knowledge of new technologies. This means that we journalists needed to study more, to create study groups, research groups, in order to understand how we can use new technologies better in our work, and to reach a wider audience. And new technologies offer the opportunity to enlarge our readers, moving from the press to radio to TV to the web to the social networks. This has led to an enlargement of our audience. So today we can reach a much wider part of the public than we did 5 years ago. So the first thing is knowing new technologies and studying how to use them. The second element is to safeguard the quality of good journalism. So the serious research of news, the evaluation of sources, the presence of journalists who need to go where the news happen, and they need to always have doubts about what they see. So these two challenges that belong to different times in history, a present that becomes future every day. Today we cannot know what the platforms of the future will be in 6 months, not in the far future. If you ask me on which platform will Repubblica be writing in 6 months, well, I wouldn't be able to answer. But this is challenging because you become some kind of pioneer. And, well, pioneers might make mistakes, but in the end, they go on towards their targets. Then there is this second aspect, that of defense, the discovery of the future with passion and flexibility, and the safeguard of what we have as a heritage. Thank you.
Guardi, io sono molto d'accordo con...
Well, I do agree with what my colleagues said, particularly with reference to the great difficulties we all encounter at the moment, but also the great opportunities we have as pioneers, as Maurizio was saying, that these transformation times give us, because we are the leaders of the so-called editorial industry. So this is, in a way, an industrial revolution in itself, not just a technological revolution. So these are extraordinary challenges for those who have the honor and the duty to experience them. But I would like to add something. The issue, the question of power in Fratelli Tutti, in the Pope's letter, the Pope talks about the relationship between newspapers and social networks that inherited massively the public debate. We were managing the public debate in the past, but whether we like it or not, today the public debate goes beyond TV, radios, and newspapers. It actually happens mainly on social networks. So in a way, the newspapers have lost, the press has lost its power. We have all lost power, so to speak, if we make a comparison to 20 years ago. Why? Because facts, news that we supply are easily accessible by the public, free, if not in a legal way, but they can also be manipulated. This is a great risk for us. Those who now create information and news cannot control this news. We do not know what the news we publish will then develop into. News can be manipulated, revisited, changed, and transformed into something different, and we cannot really do anything about it because we cannot control this process, and this is very, very risky. We don't have any weapon to actually counter this risk. In a way, the fact that newspapers have lost power is not all bad, because we need to be more aware of what our role is, what are the mistakes we have made. So the fact that we have lost this power that was stronger before the social network era makes us be more humble in the way we provide news and admit that there is a margin of error. But then there is another aspect. There is this manipulation of facts, which is not something we can control. And then there is also another aspect, especially with reference to social networks. There is great confusion among the public between what is communication and what is information. These two themes seem to be overlapping, but they're not. They're completely different. Communication is a very noble art, but it has nothing to do with information. So this overlapping for young people, but also for people who have studied and have a clear perception of the world, well, they think that a politician who actually announces something on Twitter is actually given some piece of information. But this is not information, this is a communication. The journalist that acts as an intermediary between the public and the politician is actually providing an information. So we need to safeguard this cultural sensitivity, because this is a great risk for democratic institutions that are not based on communication. They're based on information. So this is the great risk for us.
Abbiamo detto tante cose.
Many things were said already. Most of them were extremely interesting. The demonstration of the fact that information in the world of journalism are followed with great attention is provided by the great audience who is here with us today, who came to listen to our thoughts, how we see things, and how we think our future can develop and our everyday life can develop. And this is something that really impresses me at this time when the press is experiencing a crisis. But actually, this crisis has always been there in a way. We Italians are used to crisis. There is always a crisis ongoing in Italy. So we are very brave in facing the future. There are two dates, as far as I'm concerned, with reference to our job that is extremely beautiful, fascinating, and difficult. That is to say, April 2020 and June 2020. In April 2020, one of the famous urgent decrees that were issued by the President of the Council of Ministers that would identify what the essential services were. And journalism was actually identified as an essential service. We didn't grasp this opportunity. Obviously, we were in the middle of an emergency, but society gave us really a great opportunity together with the health service and public service, security service. We were the only people who could actually go around in these empty cities, ghost cities, as Milan. I remember that Milan was really empty because, well, people had died already. In Rome, yes, people were staying at home, but the situation was a bit different. So we started to live this kind of darkness, emptiness. So we have to win this darkness through friendship and brotherhood. So in April 2020, we were identified as essential services, and we need to prove that we are essential because also because of economic reasons, people wanted to communicate, wanted to express their opinions, and but they are not as ready to listen to different opinions or to read. So there is a mismatch between offer and demand. But there is a lot of interest because obviously news have turned into a primary good, a commodity like cereals or oil. So they have their own value. And we work with very, very delicate goods. In June 2020, fake news that were spread around the world were more numerous than the true ones. So small and big newspapers have the responsibility to distinguish the reality from what is not true. Sergio Lepri was my director, who then, he wrote a book, but actually I would have liked to buy it and to give it to all young journalists, but it's not easy to find it. So write well and be understandable. Well, these are the basic rules. If you find this book, buy it, because it is really a fundamental exercise of democracy to write well and be understandable. Notarelli once said, with one of his paradoxes, journalists want to explain people things that they themselves do not understand. Obviously, we have a difficulty in understanding what happens. The Pope himself, the President of the Republic himself, have difficulties in interpreting the reality. But I'm very grateful to be a journalist because I know that it is an essential service, but I also know that there are more fake news that work on your opinion more than real news do. So be revolutionary. Go to a kiosk and buy a newspaper. This is a way that makes you exercise your freedom. This is the basis of democracy, freedom of expression and freedom of information, which is part of the U.S. Constitution amendments. Thank you.
Please keep your mic in your hands because we're about to start our second example. So I'm going to start with the example of the European Stability Mechanism that has been very much contested by many people who didn't even know what it is about. Members of Parliament on social media were completely against the European Stability Mechanism, but when asked what it is about, they didn't know what to answer. And I'm making this example because one of the central topics in information and communication is complexity. So the European Stability Mechanism is a complex topic. There are lots of topics which are complex, and social media have the tendency of kind of reducing this complexity to a yes or a no. So there is a tendency towards ideology and extreme simplification, and that's extremely dangerous for democracy itself. At the same time, social media are your suppliers as well. So my question to you is the following. Is it possible for a daily paper to inform on said complexity in an appropriate way? Rather for this complexity to, in a way, turn the topic into a boring one. There are lots of people who are not willing to read excessively long bits of text. I mean, it seems to me that you are asked a very complex topic. Social media creates this illusion of democracy, but actually they express their view without being knowledgeable about what they're talking about. And this is a very damaging illusion. Can you express your views on this? Okay, I'll start again. That's why you were stopping me. I will be shorter. This is also a very complex topic. First of all, I would say beware of acronyms. Also with ministers, I mean, I find it really very hard to understand what they are. They completely change. They constantly change their name. Then they have similar competencies, but then they use these acronyms in the very same European Stability Mechanism. I mean, we are faced with this challenge. And ultimately, that's part of everybody's life. Pope Ratzinger gave a perfect definition of finance. Finance is a bridge between current times and the future, and the economy is the current times and the future. And we live both. So all of we live both times. So being able to express complex concepts, which are sometimes translated from English, which is a problem in Europe. I mean, we as Italians have a very rich language, and we have to translate terms from English, and sometimes this terminology is really difficult. So we should resort to our to the wealth of our language. So we should try and reinforce our Italian language, which is basically our intelligence. And today one would talk about a cultural gap. Yes, or we might even say instead of using the word gap in Italian, we might use the Italian equivalent, which is divario. We have such a rich language that when we actually add the zero budget in our constitution, actually we talked about balance. But that's not the same thing as zero budget, because you may be in balance but not having reached a zero balance. So we we should make reference to this wealth. We should, in a way, translate reality by reading a lot, reading other people's papers, reading books, reading literature, reading the literature from which we can understand and always learn a lot of interesting lessons, because we have this immense culture than machines. But as Einstein said, machines can solve problems, they cannot generate problems. We can generate problems, so we have to be aware of the problems we generate, and we have to give answers to all those who read us. Platforms, social media are definitely important. They represent the future. However, they have to comply with some standards. I'm referring, for example, to the New York Times issue against ChatGPT. In other words, actually, they have to comply with our rules and copyright. They have to respect copyright, because because basically what Bergoglio said is right. Everything stems from the individual, so we have to leave some certainties, like the respect towards those who create intellectual property. So Agnese Pini. You have just said that social networks are the basically come from thought, because they take likes, and so they basically are based on opposite theses and antithesis, and the two things are incompatible. And from this point of view, also probably also newspapers are incompatible with social networks. But we cannot but be in social networks. We cannot but use them, because, as I was saying before, the public debate is now there. If papers are basically in their own realm and said, okay, we don't like social media, we have no alternative.
Possibile dentro il dibattito pubblico, però.
So the real risk is when we overlap information and communication, because we spend a lot of time in social networks as well. This is a problem that concerns us all. In order to be more present in the social networks, we tend to become too similar to social networks as well. By the way, social networks are not the realm of information that can inhabit them. The information can inhabit social networks, but they are the realm of communication. It is often said that social networks are inhabited by those who produce content. Actually, they are full of content, but actually this content is basically a yes or a no, a heart or another icon that is the opposite. So basically they've been created to generate a thesis and an antithesis. So the risk we run is that we oftentimes run the risk to, in a way, make confusion between ourselves and social networks. Newspapers should continue to do one thing in this fragmentation of communication, of being social. We should continue doing our work. We already have all the tools that enable us to do well. We have a professional role to respect, to comply with ethical rules. We have limits which are ethical, value-based. I mean, we cannot publish photos of minors, but this can be done in social networks. We cannot insult the others. We have to check what we write, and this is something that doesn't happen in social networks. So this is what information is about. And so information already has basically all the antibodies, so to say, all the tools that it needs to inhabit complexity, to inhabit, social networks. We have to constantly remind ourselves that we know how to do that and of doing it daily without, in a way, not resisting the temptation of limiting ourselves to a yes or a no, the ones that are so easily expressed in social networks.
Molinari.
Ma il punto è che noi siamo...
So, Molinari, you have the floor. Well, we are living basically a very early stage in the social revolution. Let me give you a comparison. When the radio was turned into a mass media, happened after Hitler went to power, the following year when he went to power. One of the decisions that Chancellor Hitler took was to give subsidies to German families so that they could buy a radio. Goebbels uses radio devices so that the Nazi propaganda could be easily spread to the families, and this consolidated the ideology at the families, within the families. If up to that moment news would arrive through the press or through passe parole, well, suddenly this new tool, the radio, was managed by Hitler to consolidate its power, entrusting this power to Goebbels. And then we know that today the radio is a major tool to have an exchange of views. And this is something that normally happens when you are at the beginning of a technological revolution. So we are at the beginning of a new season. So again, quoting Sergio Mattarella this morning, Homo homini lupus, so we are still in the woods, so to say, and everybody can attack anybody else. So the question in these conditions is how to start imposing rules that can, in a way, transfer the state of law from the physical reality in which we live in the digital reality. That's the real challenge. The challenge consists in the creation and coding of digital rights. This topic that we are all not so familiar with induces us to, helps us understand why the chancellor of an American school to the freshmen of an American university, telling them that if actually they would ever imagine to be lawyers as their grandparents or fathers had done, they would never find a job. They would have had to invent the legal profession. So, and the challenge was that, and is now that of digital rights. In one of his latest contributions in Davos, Angela Merkel actually said that there are three types of internet. One is the internet that actually was created in the United States. It is totally protected by freedom of expression that enables the big giants of the companies of the Silicon Valley to play the lion's share and to be sometimes also very aggressive towards their competitors. The other extreme is the Chinese model, where you have complete control over digital communications on the part of the Communist Party. And then we have the European model. The European model is based on the law. And since this speech by Angela Merkel, the European Parliament and the European Commission have adopted directives and pieces of legislation like the Digital Service Act, which start very gradually with a bottom-up approach to define digital rights. And this is the way to go. If I were to give advice to law students or lawyers in European countries, I would say that this is actually the real topic. We need to, in a way, focus on the state of law protecting us as Europeans and actually have it match with digital reality. I think this can be the most appropriate answer to the dangerous use of social networks especially in a way from leaders, in order to be defended from personalities like Donald Trump, who actually, who yesterday gave an interview, and in that conversation, the interviewer was some kind of an accomplice to the interviewed, and that was sold as an interview. And this shouldn't be done. And then people inhabiting the social networks shouldn't fall prey of autocrats or personalities like this, as Goebbels did in the last century. I'd like just to add a few remarks to the many things that have been said. First of all, we need to understand that our public, our audience, has now taken on a different approach. The relationship they had on the internet with information of some years ago is already very different from the kind of relationship that a bit of a public opinion in the various countries currently has. Some years ago, thanks to the broadband and the explosion of social networks, led to their explosion on the net. And many people said that basically the life of newspapers was over because everybody talked about free information. In the United States, I'm not talking about Italy, because we have our own reference groups. Why are there 8.8 million Americans deciding to subscribe to the New York Times, and they do not choose to use a large variety of social networks to be informed? Probably they do so because they attach value to something that is very, very different from what other tools of communication and information can give. I think this is a very relevant issue. And with this, I'm saying that, of course, we can live with social networks. We can bring our information on all the channels that technology will make available. However, if we do so, we have to be something different, because we need to understand things well, we need to prioritize, we need to provide our readers every day a daily agenda, an agenda made up of news, of verified news, of reflections. And this kind of work is the opposite with the essential spirit of a social network, which is basically speed, easy answers, or the enormous propensity to, in a way, affirm our point of view as the absolute one. Then the use of communication, propaganda, and search for consensus. These are all tools that should not have to do with serious information and responsible information. This is a fundamental aspect between us and the social networks. Social networks are sometimes a very good source of news. They are a good way to, in a way, reach broader audiences, but their task is different. And let us also make an exercise. Let's assume that you were to write an essay without information papers and only, in a way, bringing together the many information available from a social network. I mean, videos from politicians or influencers and so on. I mean, that will be a hell. I mean, there's a moment in your day, in your life, in which you have to kind of find a reference point that you can entrust for your information agenda to, in a way, learn about what news are more important and to reflect upon this news. So very easy, illusory answers to solve complex problems is not the recipe. So thinking that a piece of news which is very significant for us can be solved through a video lasting only 60 seconds or in a way which mixes entertainment with information, in my view, is not the right way of, in a way, doing information, of providing information. I might sound outdated, but I would like to say that maybe in our public debate and in our schools, we should try and recover the fact that not everything is easy in life. If you are to become a good doctor, you have to study. If you want to become a good engineer, of course you have to sacrifice yourself. And the same applies to information. If you want to do good information, you have to spend time in actually searching and not be content of easy, instantaneous answers. 6-7 years ago, we had a system that told us what news were, how news could be organized, and how this news could be basically matched in order to reach the largest number of users, of readers. I mean, that's fun, but that's not the right way of doing information. That's not information, and that's not the information that we want to do. And I think it is not useful for everybody, for anybody. This is not what people and community need. Thank you very much. A final round.
È un dato statistico che
So it is a statistical data during the pandemic when social media started to be at the cradle to
in qualche modo voleva capire qualcosa in più e questi
to conspiracies. So actually the newspapers were the source of information people turned to. So this is a way to play your role, but you also have your own opinion and your ideas with your comments, with the titles you choose. So they are in themselves an interpretation. So we enter some kind of pluralism, because this means that there are so many different newspapers with different opinions, but we need to understand that there is a pluralism also inside a single newspaper. So many people read newspapers because they feel you're closer to them, to their political or cultural ideas, to their social ideas. So this a legitimate choice, and so there are so many different newspapers. So what is, according to you, the relationship between your cultural and political identity and pluralism? Maurizio Molinari, this is a very interesting question, and it has something to do with what we were saying before, that is to say, the need to update our knowledge of new technologies, because the identity part of our readers actually follow paper newspapers, whereas those who actually read the news digitally are of less homogeneous type. So we need to give a more defined identity on paper and to use a more universal language digitally. This means we need to diversify the contents that are published on the different platforms, because, as we said before, there are different types of public: those who buy newspapers and those who surf the websites of newspapers, and again those who surf social networks. So these are different people, different kinds of people. So, what I believe is needed, we need to have data analysts, and those who work on our data tell us that there are different types of public. Those who go on the website of Republic are not those who buy newspapers, nor those who actually surf the social networks. So we need to use different languages to reach everyone in a different way. So it is clear that the paper, newspaper, is our first identity. So, for instance, the battle between Meloni and Salvini will be recounted in a different way on the newspaper and will speak to the reader in a different way. However, if the Indian shuttle arrives on the moon, here you do not give different points of view. Just need to, give the news, be the first one to deliver the news, and be accurate. So this is what it is important to have a further reflection and study of the news that are published on the web. This is the real challenge. We need to convince our digital reader to spend time in reading, and when people do not devote enough time to reading, they become intolerant. So if you just read the first 3 lines of an article and think that you have understood everything, actually you come to conclusions that are not the correct one, and then maybe write about it on social networks because you don't take the time to think. This is the real risk, some kind of a short circuit. And I do agree with what Luciano Fontana was saying before. An antidote here could be to lead new generations in the educational system to safeguard themselves when they use social networks. This is to say, we need to teach them how to read on paper books. So we arrived at the digital world, but we first started reading on paper, because you need time to read a book, you need time to read an article. But the new generations do not know this because they never read books. They've started gathering information on the web. So this is something on which newspapers can do a very important work, but we need to be supported by the information system, and we need to be able to face the digital challenge. Thank you.
Sì, naturalmente il tema dell'identità di un giornale è un tema molto importante.
So, well, the theme of the identity of a newspaper is extremely important for us, because sometimes the Corriere della Sera was called, or rather was trying to keep together a lot of things that were not meant to be together. So, well, I'd like to share a few clear thoughts with you. First, I think that a newspaper, and I mean an information system, so many other information systems as well, this actually, well, a newspaper cannot be, or can think to be, the mirror of its readers, because this is extremely dangerous. It creates some communities. People think to belong to certain communities, but there is no debate, there is no growth, development. So this is extremely important. One of the things I don't like in politics is when politicians say, I'm just like you. No, you don't have to be like me. You need to be better than me because I voted for you. So I want for you to give me projects, visions. So the same applies to newspapers. So having a strong identity doesn't mean to have points of view that are exclusive of others. No, our readers, our Italians in general, should not feel excluded from our information. We have to create an information system that anyone can use. But this doesn't mean that we agree with anybody. It just means that we are serious in the way we deliver the news, we respect the different opinions, and in the end, if you don't agree with what I write, you know anyway that I do respect you, that I do respect your point of view. So this is a very difficult balance to strike in a world where everyone is looking for a well-defined identity and pluralism, opening up new horizons is something that we have to strive for. If I read the newspapers and I do not discover new points of view, well, that means that that newspaper has failed. Because the newspaper needs to be original, and this strong identity is an open identity based on respect for the readers. We need to have internal opinions. They do not need to agree. My opinions not always agree one with the other. But I do believe this is something extremely useful for those who read our newspaper, and it is also the ground for the development of a critical way of thinking that is fundamental for the growth of society, for finding an economic and social role, and here I quote in a way President Mattarella, to create a society that knows that conflict can give us a new opportunities for the future. Otherwise, we will not do anything useful for our country.
Allora, la domanda sì, è vero, è molto bella, molto.
It is an extremely interesting question, the diversity between profession and identity. As a person, as a man, I know that I have to read, I have to be able to listen to others, I need to go deep into what I want to know. As a professional, I know that I have the duty to make people know things as a public service, as an essential service. So my duty is to inform people about what happens through some rituals that are not far from theater. The newspaper is the same piece that is staged every day. It's not a Netflix series where everything is taken for granted. So when I talk to my colleagues, I often tell them, you shouldn't take everything for granted, because readers need to read about things that happen here on our planet. So this is, in a way, something that we have to stage every day. I am a romantic, yes, I know that, but I love gathering people. So what President Mattarella said this morning is that friendship doesn't need to happen only among people who are similar one to the others. It needs to happen between people that are different, and it has to reduce inequalities and differences. Otherwise, you just have mirrors. The reader that looks a confirmation to his ideas when he reads the newspaper, and this is a great responsibility for a newspaper. We cannot feed discrimination. We have to fight discrimination by using the right words in explaining difficult realities. Whereas on social networks, and there are some interesting books and studies carried out, for instance, by a professional like Susan Grenfeld on the exaltation of discrimination that actually happens through the use of likes on social networks. So this is our frontier, so to speak, but obviously the newspaper is the place of people who wanted to find someone who's similar, whereas the social network are for all those who wanted to find a new pieces of information. So we are, in a way, the artisans in our work as journalists. We don't send shuttles into the outer space, but we also shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. We have to communicate more with people. Last but not least, Agnese. So I have the honor and duty to conclude this debate, so I'll try to summarize what has been said this afternoon. All my colleagues talked about the importance of the identity of newspapers. So an identity is a guarantee for the readers, because the newspaper shouldn't belong to its own director, who is a director for just a few years, or the editor, the publisher, because newspapers are cultural products. And they live for a very long time. Resto del Carlino and La Nazione have a very long history. So this is the guarantee of identity. This cultural product, by respecting its identity, is bought by the readers who recognize themselves in the identity of the newspaper. So if this identity is not respected, readers do realize that and stop buying these newspapers. So there is a balance, so to speak. Identity is extremely important because it makes it possible for newspapers, but also for digital newspapers, even if the public is more volatile, there is anyway a strong identity. This is the first guarantee for our readers. And then there is also another aspect which is also extremely important that newspapers can offer. That is to say, we do something that is extremely useful in comparison with the social networks. If we, for instance, I don't know, are those who don't want to have people coming here, immigrants, or if you're obsessed with, I don't know, high heel shoes, the algorithm of your social network will give you feeds on these themes. So you will become part of a bubble where you have only news and feeds on these themes, because so this is the situation you'll find yourselves in, because the algorithm will you will never have an alternative to the reality that you yourself have built. So this is a great issue, because in newspapers, on the contrary, you find that pluralism that is necessary for you to know that reality around you goes beyond what you like or what you are interested in. The secret of a newspaper is that of opening up minds beyond the interests of the individuals that can actually limit our capability to think and reflect. Then there is a third element which is extremely important. Identity, pluralism of information, but there is also the fact that newspapers are made of many different people. I'm talking about radios and TVs as well. There are so many people that work to create these. Newspapers are the result of meetings between different colleagues, and it is necessary to have so many people together, working together. When the individual journalist or the individual influencer, even if they have great talent, they are on their own. And when you're on your own, inevitably you are more prone to make a mistake. So a newspaper is the sum of different choices. So since we make so many choices, we can make many mistakes. So every time you make a choice, you might make a mistake. You can reduce this margin of error in newspapers because there are many different people working together, so those meetings I was talking about. And this helps us limiting our margin of error. This is why this is a guarantee for you, for the readers, particularly in a world where understanding the difference between reality and virtual reality we will ourselves produce through the algorithms becomes more and more difficult. This does not mean that you won't find mistakes in newspapers. As I said, when you have to choose, you are prone to error. But the identity, diversity, and pluralism of different people that make choices together is a guarantee in terms of the information you're getting. Thank you.
Nietzsche ha detto una volta, non esiste.
Nietzsche said once, there are no facts, there are just interpretations. So we had today the chance to participate in this debate that showed us that the facts do exist, but we needed to let them talk. We need to identify them, but that also interpretations exist, evaluations, thoughts. So I would like to thank you all, because today we are now, well, in a better position to evaluate evaluations. This is an open dialogue that we have also with newspapers because of transparency. When I read a newspaper, I do it in a critical way. It is a contribution to my evaluations, my social, economic, political choices. And without newspapers, that would be impossible. So I would like to thank you again for your contribution. That has been very clear, transparent. Thank you and good evening.
Grazie Maurizio, grazie. Facciamo ancora una foto.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale, non è un'idea. Innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il piano Easy Smart a canone zero, anziché a 3,90 € al mese. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca. Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Nasce Easy Bank, la nuova banca digitale di Intesa Sanpaolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.